The most frustrating thing is how much of an idiot I feel like, and what I mean about an idiot is, even though I started noticing what he was doing because he treated me nice, I'm like, I was still like something just doesn't jive. But he's just a con man. He's a con man. You can keep that in there. I told him at the
All right,
lawyers
good.
that I told him at the lawyers and the gloves are off, that I am. Anybody who's got anything to say, questions, I will answer everything 100% truthfully. I told him in his face. So he can come back
Oh,
at me with that one all he wants. I told him that in front of my lawyer when he did that whole signing,
nice.
when he did that signing paper at the diner.
Mm.
Um, I looked at the timeline of that. I was like, wow, I was the last guy he asked, like the last stronghold. If you look at the dates,
Oh yeah.
and after almost 3 hours at that diner, he literally said, "Look, I'm so sorry that you got involved and stuff. Only the lawyers will see this. This is just to keep you out, and nobody will see this. But that he will change that line for me."
Hmm.
I didn't feel right. I said, "All right, it's been plenty of hours," and I signed it. Man, just over 24 hours later, my phone blew up. They put that thing on the second page of the evidence package. Like, we got it. We got it. The last stronghold. And that morning, I rushed straight to my lawyer.
Mm.
We had that line change. We made an agreement, but I told them I'm not holding out anything. I had people that would ask me questions, and I would share a little, but I would say off the record, like, don't say my name. But after that, man, I called everybody. I go, hey, whatever I told you off the record, put my name on it. Yeah, I told them. I was just so upset. I was really surprised.
I remember that day. I couldn't believe you signed it either, but
No, it was it wasn't
yeah,
even
that's
the
what they do.
persuasion.
They manipulate.
It's whatever it takes, literally. But it was kind of like, now I think about it, it's like if he said, you know what, let me just tell him what he wants to hear. At the end, I'll deny it all anyways. He'll deny it all. And I remember he said, well, I have recording from the diner. I said, perfect. Release it. Release it. I know it was a bluff, but I wanted him to release it. You can literally see him and his wife and us for 3 hours.
with
Three
the son
hours.
on the speakerphone, right?
Oh, his son on the speakerphone for about 3/4 of it. But he was just showing me all these people that had signed papers saying, a possibility. He's like, come on, man, look at these papers. Come on, man, you can't say you're 100% sure. I'm like, I'm 100% sure. I thought I'm 100% sure. In one part, I even said, come on, man. I said, Billy, I I did it in my house on a MAME computer that I set up, and I was able to duplicate your look. All right, come on. And I didn't even release that. I said I'm just going to stick to the arcade to help you, and his story started changing. But if you want to look at that video that he doesn't have, it's literally out of the 3 hours we ate for 20 minutes, and then the rest of it we're literally looking at this piece of paper he wanted me to sign for 2 hours. 2 hours. Him and his wife trying like a sales pitch. And finally, I'm like, whatever. All right, if you're gonna change it and no one's gonna see it, no problem. Boy, he showed that to everybody. They put that on like the second page of the evidence package,
Mm-hmm.
while all the signature papers were in the back. I was like, unbelievable, unbelievable. But on to you guys.
Yeah, so let's go ahead and get rolling for real. Hello, my name is Walter, ersatz Cats Online, and today I've got a crew of people looking to talk about the current Billy Mitchell Twin Galaxies lawsuits, both the original Billy lawsuit against Twin Galaxies and now the countersuit. First, let's start with introductions. Let's see. We'll get to all that stuff in a moment. First, tell us a bit about yourself, everyone. Let's start with Steve.
What's up, guys? Stephen Kleisath. I'm in Pompano Beach, Florida. Obviously I've been unfortunately in some ways involved with the situation or at least in the know about it for the last few years since 2018, but been part of the classic arcade community for a while. Hold the current world record in Mario Brothers arcade platform, all the variations there. And in the positive, I've met a lot of great people like the following gentlemen throughout the course of the last several years as a result of the community and our, as far as me and David goes, our love of certain classic arcade titles, and as far as Carlos, getting to befriend him at the beginning of our involvement, I guess you could say, in the dispute process, which was initially to defend and exonerate Bill in February of 2018. But otherwise, good to see you finally, Walter. And yeah, ready to roll. Whatever questions you have, fire away.
Yeah, how about Carlos? Introduce yourself.
Hey everybody, my name is Carlos Pineiro, and I got involved with this thing by chance. It just happens to be I was a game tech many years ago, and I didn't meet Billy. I met his friend Robert Childs because I had a whole bunch of game boards I decided I was going to throw away one day, and I said, you know what? Let me do one last chance to see if I can find a buyer. And I found the arcade game sales. I went over there. I made them a deal. Childs bought my boards, and never really spoke to him much, but I liked his shop, and that's how I got involved in it. One day I saw a post by Robert Childs about a game converter, which is now the famous 2-bit converter. And I read it. I replied to it. Man, next morning I got a lot of calls and messages, especially from Steve, asking if I wanted to look into this thing. Went by and I said, yeah, how long can it take? I didn't think it'll take long. And I had not met Billy. I really didn't know who he was. And then when I saw him, I go, man, I've seen him somewhere. And it was, of course, from like video game documentaries or something. And that's how I got involved. And I honestly thought it would be like maybe a 1-week thing. I'm like, oh, this is going to be quick. But it was not. And interestingly, I've fallen in love with the community. I like the people. I've been to events. I am not a video game high score holder, but I have met a lot of good people. And I just got stuck in it. Got stuck in this investigation by accident, but that's my story. And unfortunately, after all the work I was doing, I'm like, there's something off here. And when I came to the conclusion, I was like, yikes. And I released it. And I think like 2 or 3 days after I released my findings, Billy Mitchell lost all his scores. And I felt bad about that because I liked the guy, but I was asked to say the truth, and that was the truth. But now they're trying to change the story on me and stuff, but that's my introduction. That's how I got involved with this.
Yeah,
and real quick, Walter, like, again, I date back 8 years being friends with Robert and Bill, very good friends with Robert Childs, and, friends with Bill to the point where we worked together on an event I hosted every month or every other month at Robert Childs' shop, which is Arcade Game Sales in Fort Lauderdale, Florida. I hosted it, advertised it, Robert facilitated it. Billy showed up as kind of like the figurehead, roaming around, taking pictures with people, hanging out, that kind of thing. And so that dates back all the way to 2011. Is when I first, I bought a machine off of Robert, a Miss Pac-Man machine. And wasn't the greatest deal, but, I really wanted a dedicated cabinet, as they call it, at that point. And I was started, get back into playing some of the classic arcade titles that I had kind of gone away from for some years. But yeah, I met Robert that way, and then we got to the point where we were doing this event on a pretty pseudo regular basis. I'd see Bill and Robert all the time, periodically, usually once or twice a week. I'd go by the shop in between transportation jobs and play some games, shoot the shit, talk about stocks. Robert does day trading. He does a lot of different things. Of course, he has this business with arcade game sales. But, like I said, I knew them both really well for 8 years leading up to this dispute that materialized. And I just wanted to add that in too, as far as my historical perspective or timeline, if you will, with leading up to the situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And you, David, tell us a bit about yourself and how you got involved with all this.
Well, my name is David Race. I've been, and I guess you could say, arcade enthusiast since the early 80s. Pac-Man was always my favorite game. Eventually, it came to the point in 2009 that I did a perfect Pac-Man, and then became the fastest perfect Pac-Man. And I still hold that record to today. I'm also what you could call a someone who is interested in like Christian apologetics. I remember one of the first times I interacted with Steve, I think was in 2011. I know he had actually mentioned that they were having an event for arcade game sales. And I think that's probably, I don't know if it was early or maybe like late September 2011. So I first got messages from Steve. And then I saw that, he was interested in trying to do the Miss Pac-Man Turbo. And then he was going to go for Mario Brothers and things like that. And then, we had kind of like interactions and stuff like that. And then the beginning of 2018, February, I started seeing things show up that Billy Mitchell's scores were called into question. I started to post things that I thought, about the situation I thought were wrong. People were making assumptions. And then shortly after that, in February, I was actually contacted by certain in the gaming community, or those who were supporting Billy Mitchell, saying that Billy wanted to talk with me. And so I did respond, and I called Billy, and then we've had interactions since then. And the whole process, I thought initially was a sham, that it was a joke, that a lot of the things in the Twin Galaxies forums, let's say, was an act of poisoning the well. I was certainly not, against Billy. I was doing all that I could to defend him early on. And then eventually I had gained access to Billy Mitchell's Donkey Kong boards that he said that he played for the disputed scores. And then a period of like a month and a half, couple months or whatever it was, I came to the conclusion that whatever it was, the results had to have been from something other than what they were claiming. They claimed that they had used a 2-bit score converter that Carlos referenced, and the orientation of the boards that were coming from Billy's hardware didn't match. It certainly didn't match what we see in the King of Kong. And so basically, I left it open with an inconclusive status. It's like, whatever it is, it certainly was not as they were claiming it was. And then my view began to change. That was in September of 2018. September 2nd, I submitted my initial assessment to Jerry Byram of the International Video Game Hall of Fame. And a few months after that, I was contacted again by Billy. It was kind of like, I thought the thing was pretty much over, and I still held to an inconclusive position. And then they were trying to say that we got all this other kind of things, and we're looking at game analysis and things like that. I was one of the people that thought that the games that we saw on the videos could have been manipulated or could have been edited by a third party, such as Dwayne Richards. And I didn't think this was an insurmountable thing. But new evidence came to light later in that year of 2019, where I discovered that the master tape, the original tape that they said they didn't have, actually showed these elements, these certain things that we find in the disputed tapes, such as the signature of the girder finger, and that kind of like opened the door. It's not necessarily right away the floodgates, but it opened, like a little whole bit at a time where things started coming in. And I said, there's no way this could have been this way. So, but anyway, that's me. That's kind of like my introduction into this, and I guess you can go from there.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I believe, Steve, you probably got like actively involved in the dispute stuff before the other two. Tell us about how you like. Do you recall how you first heard about the dispute and how you first started working on? I mean, obviously, all three of you entered on the belief that, well, I've known Bill for years. He's got to be innocent, do you recall the first time you really heard about the dispute, Steve?
Yeah, I think I saw the Donkey Kong forum post of it, because it was the disputes by Jeremy Young, initially, that he submitted to Twin Galaxies. And I started kind of hearing rumblings about it on some of the DKF Donkey Kong forum, and I remember sending Robert some Facebook messages and like, do you guys realize that there's a dispute going on with Bill's DK scores? And at that point, wound up talking with Bill. Okay, hold on 1 second. I'm getting the rundown. We removed.
I got the same thing.
Cool. I just got a message from Zoom. Typically, it's only 40 minutes, I think, if it's more than 3 people, but they've removed it, and that was the message they were giving me. So that's good. So we have more time. So initially, I was seeing posts about it. I know I have Facebook messages where I messaged Walter, have you seen this? Like that kind of thing. And then, finally got to the point where we were all at the shop and obviously talking about it. And obviously my mindset at that point was exactly like, well, this has to be a bunch of, conspiracy theory, or I don't know, just like obviously at that point, the furthest thing from my mind was that, the polar opposite of what it actually was. So, at that point is when it led to Robert making that post. And basically that post that Carlos replied to on Facebook was how a 2-bit converter works, I believe. So Robert was kind of breaking down, this is how the equipment works. This is why this is authentic, kind of thing. And then, it caught Carlos's eye, of course, and he made a reply. And I think he may have made a mention that he used to work for Sega as a game board technician. And when I saw that reply, I was like, because remember, I'm in help Bill and Robert mode here. They're my friends. And I was like, oh, wow, this guy could be a great asset from the technical standpoint to kind of, address this dispute and figure out, what's wrong about it, or, what is this guy claiming and what's the truth of the matter, like on behalf of Bill and Robert, that would exonerate him and prove that these scores were legitimate. And so, yeah, I reached out to Carlos. I was like, you seem pretty well versed in this kind of stuff, like especially the equipment. And then that piqued his curiosity, and I wound up setting up a meeting eventually with me, him, Bill, and Robert at Arcade Game Sales. And at that point, it was basically going to be where they presented, they told us they had the original equipment that they recorded those games on, and they gave us full access. Me and Carlos, I was managing it more and just kind of assisting, being there as support. And Carlos was privy. We're both privy to the 2-bit converter, the capture card, the arcade cabinet, all the equipment they said they used to record direct feed those 3 games. Carlos had access to basically recreate the direct feed setup and just test the equipment in general, typically why I would play Donkey Kong. And then that would correlate with Bill coming in and playing on the machine. I think Carlos actually recently found some video actually where you could actually see all of us. You could see Bill playing, oddly enough, not in his suit, which I think is pretty rare.
Ooh,
and then, what's that?
Interesting.
Yeah, me right next to Bill, and then Carlos from the back of the machine. And we're all just talking, verbiage. And, again, we set up shop in Arcade Game Sales on the main showroom floor from about probably the end of February, I'd say, until the beginning of April, probably 6 weeks, where I would say, maybe Carlos could add to that, had to be at least 2 or 3 days a week. maybe more, that we would go in. You know, typically it was during work hours, which I know later on Robert kind of started to not want that to happen anymore because he felt it was distracting his workers and stuff too much. So initially it was during work hours, right on the showroom floor. All the equipment was there for me and Carlos to walk in whenever we wanted to and work on it. And then eventually it got to like after hours, after business hours, I think, toward the latter stages of the our participation in the process. So there's a little timeline of.
Or yeah. And Carlos, you already kind of went into how you first got involved, but did you have anything to add or any more detail to your first meeting with Billy and Robert?
Oh yeah. Steve was friends with Charles and Billy for many years. I was actually the new guy who came in and just, you know, I volunteered my work. The truth is that I had not worked on that kind of equipment in so long that I really said, "Oh, this is going to be fun." That was in my head, like, oh, you know, it brought back some old memories because I don't work on game boards for years, and I'm like, this will be cake, and I'm going to be able to work in a shop again for free. I thought it was going to be fun, and boy, was I wrong. So I was really the new guy in the group, but truth be told, when I say we, it's me and Steve. They gave us a story. I believed Billy. I believed Billy's defense. I believed Billy had an answer for everything that would be thrown at us on the forums. To the point where I said, you know what, I'm going to stop reading the forums. Steve will give me like the cliff notes of what he's found out, just so I'm up to date. I'm just going to focus on the equipment. I'll work on that. And Steve was really my scheduler. He would call in the morning. He was like, hey, Robert says we can come in today. And we would spend hours on that stuff. And a lot of the recordings and work I did, I would take home and continue on there. But we were told this was the original equipment. They borrowed the cabinet because it had been years since he had done a world record. But they brought the original cabinet for one of the games or two of the games. Oh, no, for one of the games. They showed me the receipt that this was the original 2-bit converter. They even brought me the laptop that they recorded the game on, where a child says, I gave it to my wife, so the only difference was it was like Windows 7 before and it got upgraded, but he told me this is the machine. So I remember when I was sent to Banning and I did a speech about this, one of the things I told people was, though I wasn't done with my work yet, one of the things that I feel blessed is in this work is that I have, according to Billy and Robert, access to the actual equipment that they used to make that world record, according to what they state. And no one else has access to that. So I'm going to do every test I can imagine that has to do with what we're looking for while I have access to those machines. No one else had access to that. And especially in the forum, like 99% of people are just doing speculation or conspiracy theories or what they think it could be. But there was really a handful of people that actually had a board, a converter, test equipment. Like I know David Reyes literally found somebody before he got some of the equipment that had a Donkey Kong machine. And he started work to defend his friend too.
And David, didn't Robert sent you the 2-bit converter through the mail, right?
I received a 2-bit converter from Rob. I think I received it maybe a little bit after I received the one from Jace Hall. So I actually had two 2-bit converters that I tested to see what, when I actually received, I was working on a Donkey Kong board from a local manager of an arcade here. He let me use his Donkey Kong board. And then on July 20th is when I actually received Bill's board that he said was used for the first 2 disputed scores. And then I started testing those using the 2-bit converters as well.
Right. But you started, but David, you started the research right away. You found someone who had a Donkey Kong machine before you even received the board from Billy. You had already started after you had spoken to Billy to help in the dispute. Am I correct? If I recall.
Well, I know that I did whatever I could based upon what I had at the time. And since I didn't have access to, let's say, a 2-bit converter, I would just I would go to arcades and look at the Donkey Kong transitions and things like that. And
Right.
then basically it was an attempt to poke holes in what people were claiming about Billy because, as everyone that I've talked to initially said, why, this seemed ludicrous on the face of it, but when things eventually came to the point where I could test these things, and that was after the Twin Galaxies had decided to ban and remove his scores, things didn't get better; they got worse. So I'll leave it at that.
Right. Yeah, like Steve will tell you. I remember we were getting close to the deadline of having our final report because they might not tell you this, especially Team Billy won't tell you this, but um, Jace had this rule that any findings, anything you do that's official, you must put it on the forum and you must explain to them how it was done. So their tech, I think it was Gab or Gabe. I'm sorry, I don't remember the name of the tech. Glee. I'm so sorry. Glee must be able to replicate it because Glee also had a 2-bit converter that Jace had bought, and it's the only way it would be, official. And the reason I'm bringing this up is because we would have weekly calls. Sometimes it was less than a week with Jace on the progress, on where we are, what we're doing, what we have found, what we've been able to debunk. When I mean debunk, it's Jace wasn't able to record in color, so he said it was impossible. I found a VCR from the era and they recorded it. It doesn't look like the video, but it got color. So it was like, look, I was able to record color, so it officially went on the record. All right, so they recorded color, but it doesn't look like the video. And I remember I had told Billy, hey, there's something weird here. Things were not looking good. And a couple of days before that, I see that there's talk in the shop that they're starting to reach out to David Race. And I'm like, uh-oh, I think they're moving on to another tech. This ran in my head. And the truth is, once I found like the missing key, and I'm like, oh man, this is not arcade. And not 90%, not 99%. I go, this is 100% not arcade. Like, it just isn't. I called Steve. I showed him in like non-tech English form. And when Steve saw that, he goes, oh man, we gotta call Billy. And I told him, you know what, give me a minute, let me meet with Billy in private. I'll have a talk with him. I was a nobody at the time. The most I was getting was a few little death threats from the first video I did, but it's the internet. If you don't get death threats, you're doing the internet wrong. So that's just how it goes. And I meet with Billy at the arcade game sales real late at night, and I liked Billy. Billy was nice to me, and I really wanted to help him, but this was not right. And I said, Billy, is there something you need to tell me? I mean, I'm willing to walk out of this because I'm the nobody, and just say, I can't find, or inconclusive. I would walk out and just bow out. And he looked at me straight in the face with a poker face, and he literally said, all I want you to do is say the truth. And I'm like, what? Oh, okay. So I call Steve. I go, Steve, I spoke to Billy and I had a heart to heart. And his answer was just like, he's surprised, but he said, all I want you to do is say the truth. I go, okay. and I wrote up my report. Steve cleaned it up because I write real bad. And what you saw posted was 99% exactly what I wrote. Oh, 98%. Steve, he cleaned some of my punctuations and sentences, but that was me. I wrote that, and Steve was the one that posted because I didn't have an account in the forum. And it was strange because when it came out, I got a call from Steve and Robert at the same time. They were on three-way. It's like, did you write that? Yeah, it's like, did you write that? And what's funny is that they knew I was going to write it because we had a pre-plan with Joe West and at what time we were going to release it. But they were asking me if Steve was the one who wrote that. And I go, no, Steve posted it. I wrote it. And why are you surprised? Like, they were really taken back. Like, I don't know if they thought I was going to just lie on it, but they literally told me, Billy literally told me, say the truth. And I said, okay. So I wrote it up. And then I was told, talk to Joe West. Joe West said, look, release it late at a certain time at night, because Joe West wanted to release his little speech around the same time. And that was it, man. 2 or 3 days later, they pulled all the scores. But it's really strange because a lot of this was planned, and now they're trying to act like I'm just some guy from some fanboy from the street that isn't really a tech. And they don't even bring up Steve. Steve was their friend who literally sought out me to help them. And they're acting like Steve's a nobody. And I noticed this is how Billy operates. He doesn't care if you've known him for 20 years. He'll throw you under the bus if it's going to affect his little fantasy world. And it's cruel. He's hurt a lot of good people in this community that they hold their scores real dear because it's like an accomplishment. And here comes this man who's been dressed up like a penguin for 20 years and says, no, I want that. You're nobody. Goodbye. And you're like, what? And it's sad. But yeah.
And just to be clear, Carlos, because I want to make sure that there's not any confusion, that conference call you had at the end, that was between you and Billy and Robert, and Steve was not on the call, I believe, right?
Steve was not on the call. And it was strange because I'll speed it up, but it's strange because Robert, though it was his shop, Robert tended more into the doing his stocks and stuff. So I barely had any communication with Robert. Steve would, because Steve was Robert's friend. But this was one of the first times that I had Robert literally like talking to me about the thing. It's like, and it was Robert and Billy on the call when they called me to ask me if that, if, sorry, I'm getting a call. If that post of my findings was me, if I wrote that, or was it Steve Kleisath? And I said, no, that was me, Carlos Pineiro. Steve was not on the call. And it was within minutes of it going up on the forum. But they were surprised, and oddly, they sounded surprised, but they didn't act mad. A couple days later, Billy called me for something, and he was still nice. Billy was nice to me for almost a whole year after that incident. Even bringing me hot sauces for my ex-wife's business with her name on it. And it was until that contract signing, that paper signing, where it really went downhill. Where I remember even Steve would tell me, "How can you talk to a guy like that?" I'm like, the truth is, I'm trying to be as neutral and quiet, but after that, I'm like, no, I'm just like everybody else. I'm not thrown under the bus.
Mm-hmm.
But no, Steve was not on that call.
Oh, yeah. And back to you, David. You kind of already talked about this a bit, but how did you get involved in testing the dispute? Like, or I guess to put it another way, what do you recall the first time you heard about it?
Well, apparently I didn't know at the time, but or at least I don't recall at the time that the dispute had begun either in August or September of 2017. But I think one of the first times that I heard about it was in the very beginning of February. You know, I wasn't a regular contributor, or I didn't even really go on the Twin Galaxies forums. I mean, for the scores, you know, stuff like that, you know, the perfect Pac-Man and some other things like that. That's fine, but you know, and it was like I had a what do you call it? An account on Twin Galaxies, but apparently I forgot what the password was, so I opened up another account. It was like Provol, which is my screen name, and then I opened up the Christian Pac-Man, and I began to look to see what was being posted there, and then I posted a few things. But most of my interaction, or how I came to find out about it, was on Facebook, and that was the beginning of February. And then apparently some people took notice of what I was writing in the defense of Billy Mitchell, or basically trying to say this whole thing is ludicrous. You know, it's you know, you're appealing to things, you know, without evidence. At the time, there really wasn't much evidence. Nobody had done any testing at the time, and it was just looked like it was a witch hunt. Looked like people were trying to they were out to get Billy and stuff like that. And so the beginning of February, maybe it might have been the second or third, or maybe a little bit after that, I had started making posts. And then I remember, I think I got contacted, or I'd received maybe some messages from Stephen Kleisath. And then I remember it was Rob Childs was planning. By this time, Isaiah Triforce Johnson had sent me a message on Messenger to say Billy wants to talk to me. Apparently, Billy had texted me something. I didn't know who it was, but apparently he got a hold of my number. And then Triforce Johnson later that night had called or sent a message to me on Messenger and said, Billy would like to talk with you. And then he gave me his number, and I said, okay, that's what that number was. And so I called Billy, and it was after midnight, I believe. If I go back and check, but that was like on the 9th of February. So it was like, I guess he had tried to contact me by text or earlier in that day on the 8th, and then I called him on February 9th. And then basically he was giving me the rundown of what was going on about the 2-bit converter and Rob Childs, and they were planning on, you know, this technical analysis of where they got it from and all this kind of stuff. And then that's when Rob Childs put his technical analysis, and then that's where I think one of the first times I had seen comments by like Carlos and things like that. And from that point, then it started going into we're looking at the board, you know, how the board is drawn. A lot of it was theoretical because obviously I'm not if people don't already know that people have referred to me as a tech, but I am not a professional technician. You know, so, and the thing is, I was doing my best with the information I had. From this, I would ask certain people who knew more about MAME. I said, how did, you know, you can do like a step-by-step, you know, like a point, you know, you can go through the process on a debugger to see how the screen was drawn. And I thought, okay, this looks good. And I was asking somebody who was in the know, I said, does it look like what I'm saying is correct? And the response or the feedback was positive. I said, okay, I thought I'm on the right track here. But I didn't know as much about, you know, the arcade and stuff about like there's an interrupt where obviously things that are going to show on the screen are not going to be as stepwise. Yes, the program does draw that way. But, you know, when you've got 300 or 400 different discrete steps, those are no way are those going to show up on an arcade unless you're using a more modern processor. I mean, that's why you see some of the things on MAME, for instance, or that's why you see something that uses MAME. Let's say like an arcade shop programmable PCB. You'll see similar, you know, signatures on those that you will not see on like a Z80 processor. This is the kind of stuff that I found out over time. I didn't know it at the time, but I thought I was doing my best to defend Billy. And from February on, eventually I was received as much information as I could from Billy. If you have like the clearest shots of the board that he said that he used the board originally, from what Rob Childs had said, is that his technical analysis said that they used the converter out to a 2-bit score converter out to a VCR, direct to VCR. No mention was made of a laptop. No mention was made of anything like that. I do remember when Carlos had posted his video about how they would record it to a laptop. I'm thinking, scratching my head, I don't recall Rob Child saying anything like that. It was directly to a VCR. And then it kind of like, well, the story changed. So, well, maybe we didn't say it that way. Maybe we didn't give you all the information. Well, apparently that's how things are when you talk with Billy and Rob Childs. I mean, with the experience, it's like, we didn't give that information. We gave we put out something that was so certain that Rob Childs put a $5,000 challenge out there if anybody could dispute it, that this is what a 2-bit score converter will produce. And well, I don't think he would really follow through on it, but no, a 2-bit score converter will not produce what he'd claimed in his technical analysis. Things started changing. Carlos said he tested the laptop. I used a laptop. I used maybe 2 or 3 different capture cards. One being the GigAware that Rob Child said that they used, and like Carlos said they used in their testing. I was unable to get any kind of signal, that would show this is something that would be recorded directly to a laptop. I said, well, this isn't working. I mean, I can have a VHS tape, which has a pretty stable picture, but the moment I run that, instead of to a VCR, run it to my laptop, it looked like crap. I mean, it was glitchy and it was black and white. I didn't get anything like that. So basically, I'm just rambling now. Started in February. You got a little bit of information about that. Eventually, it came to the point where Rob Childs and Jace Hall had sent me a 2-bit score converter. And at that time, I talked to Billy, and he was trying to get me a Donkey Kong machine. So the claim that he didn't try to provide material and things like that, I got the text messages where he was trying to get some others in the community that were near me to provide a Donkey Kong machine. And I said, well, no, I can't have it in my home. I'm not going to do it in my home. I don't have the room for it. And there's other reasons stuff there. I said, so I'll find somebody here locally, and they said they would let me use their shop. I'd go in the back of their arcade and I would use their Donkey Kong machine. And then shortly after that, I started doing testing with the 2-bit score converter. Billy said, we would not just give you the best pictures of the board, but we can actually send you the board. So I did receive his board set, the video board and the CPU board, on July 20th, 2018. And then shortly thereafter, I started testing that. So I have VHS, I've got DVD. I've tested it a number of different ways, as Carlos can attest. People can look at the playlist that I put on YouTube. Originally, it was unlisted, but it seems that after the evidence package came out, that unlisted playlist was made public, so everyone can look at it now. So there's no. So it ended up being a lot of testing, and it came to be an inconclusive thing. I said, well, the product of these recordings using his original hardware will not produce what we see. But I was thinking, well, I can't play my hand and say, I think this is how it could have been done. Because I knew that if I said something like that, then somebody else was going to jump over and say, yeah, that's how we did it. And I said, I can't have that. I have to know exactly how somebody did something. I'm not going to tell you how I thought it was done. Because I could think of a number of ways it could have been done. But that's why I kept asking. I said, how was it done? How was it done? Was there anything else that you used? What else came into play? I couldn't do that. And that's why it ended up being inconclusive, because technically it still could have been arcade. Something could have been manipulated. Let's say the frames could have been changed. It could have been flipped on software, the orientation, but none of that came out. And then finding out how things played out after my initial assessment in September of 2018, and evidence that basically came to light in September of 2019, things kind of went south real quick, I guess. I don't like being lied to. And if anyone's read my post on Facebook, They know that I didn't really hold back. I had people calling me or messaging me telling me, "Oh, we saw some of your posts. Could you please take it down because they're doing confidential testing." Neil Hernandez, by the way, would send me that stuff right before. It was either right before or right after I was posting something. I said, "No, I'm not going to let someone anymore dictate, what I can publicly produce. But they want to try to keep everything quiet and silent. And whether you disagree or with them or not, they just want you to be quiet. That's what they really want. And I wasn't going to do that. So there you have it.
I think an interesting moment, Walter, that Carlos and David both experienced. Both of them, from what they have told me, asked Robert the simple question of, how did you like the Boomers 1,000,062 game? How did you record that to disc and then revert or transfer it onto VHS? And I think in both cases, when they asked Robert, I think David may have messaged Robert. I know Carlos asked him, in the shop, and he just said, "I don't know, I don't remember." And I think that was a head scratching moment for both of them. How, because I know Robert for years. He's a very deliberate, calculated, very intelligent person. So for him to all of a sudden be, "Oh, I don't know, I don't remember," something like that was definitely very, odd. And that's one moment I remember them, both of them telling me at different points is, yeah, we point blank asked Robert like a simple question and he couldn't provide an answer to that, which was,
Right. Yeah. Well, for clarity, what I was told was the first two games, when I mean the first two, the King of Kong game, which is 1.047, and the Mortgage Broker game, which is the 1.050, was recorded straight to VCR. But the Boomers game, the famous board swap video, which is, it's just them creating an alibi, and that's my opinion, which I feel is very accurate. But that one was recorded straight to a laptop. Now, a lot of people don't tend to be very techy, but even if you had they had a capture board, a USB capture board, and those things, 99% of capture boards are capture in. They don't have outputs. And a computer does not have a VCR output, or what's called an RCA, the yellow cable you see in the old video games. It usually is 90% of the times a VGA. So I had asked Robert, because I'm like, wow, wait a minute. They recorded on a computer. In the board swap video, you see the laptop in there. You don't see a 2-bit converter, but you see a laptop. And I asked Robert, so the 1.062, the Boomers tape, that one was recorded straight to a computer? And he goes, yes. No VCR? He goes, no. I go, okay. Well, if you recall, if you follow this stuff, you literally see Billy at some event where he's between two televisions, where he beat Donkey Kong and he beat Donkey Kong Jr., and there's two VCRs playing the tape, playing the video that he had just broke the record the week before. Okay? That's the story. And I asked
a lot of irony about that too, regarding David's the one that recorded that, ironically,
on a camcorder, and you see the girder finger in like a few minutes into the last 10 minutes of the video. But I simply asked Robert, I'm like, Robert, if you recorded into a laptop, how did you get it out of the laptop into a VCR? Because a laptop doesn't have a video out and a VCR doesn't have a VGA in. And he told me this is all the equipment that they used. And he looked at me and he just says, it was a long time ago. I don't remember. And Robert is a guy, when I would talk to him, he had an answer for everything. And not like Billy answers, like Billy lies, where he'll tell you an amazing story and he'll say, oh, I helped that guy. No, Robert would be like, oh, I used this transformer and I did this and that. And I finally got Robert to just say, that was a long time ago. I don't remember. I go, very strange. So I attempted to burn the video into a VCR and then, make it a DVD because it had a DVD burner. And I played the DVD on a player and recorded on a VCR. And I did those tests. and I have it on an unlisted YouTube page, but I did all those tests. I'm like, this does not look like the game. Plus the orientation. Well, the 1.062 is the only game that had the orientation setting correct. But I'm like, no. Even every trick I did, everything I tried, it just didn't look the same at all. I'm like, this is unkosher. Something's off here. But I kept trying until finally I found like the key. I'm like, oh no, this is not arcade. And all three games have the signatures of not being from arcade 100%, not 99.9, 100%. That is not arcade at all. But that's for the clarity of the three games.
Right. I think another enlightening moment in David's case, if I may, David, was David was not aware of that there was footage that was discovered of a 2006 MTV interview with Robert Merzak, where he is actually showing the very King of Kong game. This was a year before the movie came out. And it's that exact game, and you can actually see the transitions where it goes to the, it draws the three girders. And I know that David was not aware that footage even existed. And when he was made aware of that, I think that may have been the tip of the iceberg. Correct me if I'm wrong, David, in David's case, as he was going through the process, the fact that that had been discovered. And I think I remember even sending it to David. He had asked me about it.
And the orientation of that too was wrong.
Yeah, I saw in an Ars Technica article,
That's right.
which was shortly after the evidence package come out. And then I think it was actually Walter himself, ersatz Katz, when I went to the link, it was what he had posted in, I think, Donkey Kong forum or something of that, if something of that nature, if I'm correct. So when I started to check it out, I actually sent Billy Jr. I said, did you know about these videos? And he said, yes. And he says, but basically, it's not going to matter. We'll use the other games or something like that. I mean, I have the messenger, conversation that we had. And, it's like, this changes the whole assessment. At that point, regardless of their whole gameplay analysis and what their plan was, to try to defend Billy, I had already come to the conclusion, at least in my mind, that if this was going to work in any way, it had to be something that was manipulated or edited. It had to be something that was somebody had attempted to pull one over on Billy, TG, and the whole community to basically frame Billy or something like that. And this kind of just, as I've said before, took it off the table. There's no way, unless somebody wants to make a grand conspiracy where MTV is in on it, which is just way too far. I remember, I think, when I was doing the testing, with the actual hardware, Billy's board, and then also the arcade owners' Donkey Kong boards, I started to see things, or didn't see things, I should say. The quality, the signal, and all that kind of stuff. I remember, talking to them about, how these things done, like Rob Child's, like, how would you, like what Carlos would say, how would you run this out of your computer to record it to a VHS? And I know how you can do it. I mean, I've done it. I mean, I've done it on my computer. I mean, you can do it with MAME, you can do it with any kind of playback, but I wanted to have him tell me. I'm not going to give an answer, like I said before, to have them try to say, oh yeah, that's how he did it. And it was like, no, it's just, I don't know. I just lost my train of thought. Sorry.
You asked Robert, and he told you the same thing. He didn't remember. He didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, it was like he had mentioned in one of our conversations that, yeah, I could run it to a computer, and then you could burn it to a DVD. And I'm thinking to myself, well, why didn't you burn it to a DVD? I mean, why in the world? I mean, that'd be a whole lot easier if you're running something digitally into a computer. You could just use the software to burn the video. I also asked him, I said, so do you have the original recording? Obviously, if you record it into a computer, you have the file somewhere, right? You have to be a file. And he says, well, we don't know where it is. It's probably on one of his hard drives somewhere. Well, you know what? If it's on one of his hard drives, then maybe somebody should light a fire under Rob Child. I told that to Billy. I said, if he's got all this evidence and pictures and videos and all this other kind of stuff, then why don't somebody find them? And because if they really did have this evidence, that would be very important to look, because it could definitely show whether this was arcade or main. If you had a file that was run directly into a computer. So I think that's something that should be looked at if this thing goes any further as far as the legal matter. I said, you know what? They claim that original recording was on a laptop, which means there has to be a file somewhere. And if that file does exist, then maybe somebody should subpoena that so we can find out what it really looks like.
Mhm.
Also,
Speaking of
Walter.
like,
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just gonna say, speaking of like photos and stuff, Steve, tell us about this lady in Sebring.
Oh, that's malarkey. Yeah, well, that was regarding the mortgage brokers convention, the 1,050,000 score. And at one point in the process, with me and Carlos at the shop on a pseudo daily basis, I remember Bill had a breakthrough moment where he was telling us how, you know, he got in touch with this woman in Sebring, Florida, that he had been friends with for years. I think I remember him saying that his son went to school with her kid or something. And that he said that she had pictures, video footage, a reading of the minutes from the organizer, and that she was going to mail it to him. And I remember him telling me and Carlos both this, and I was like, oh, wow, that's amazing. This is a breakthrough right here. I mean, like to David's point, I mean, if you actually have footage and photography and all this that exists, well, you know, first of all, I'm like, you should be going up there and just driving up there and getting it from her. But he basically was like in the mail kind of thing. And I remember when he first brought this up, again, we were still completely in exoneration defense mode of Bill. We were hoping for anything to materialize, because otherwise, you know, we were trying to realize what the core of the dispute even was, because there was all, like to Carlos's point in the Twin Galaxies forum thread, you know, people had statements that went all kinds of different directions, from the shutter effect and I mean, just all these different elements that weren't really the core of the dispute. But when Bill had mentioned to us that he knew this lady in Sebring, she was at the mortgage brokers convention at the time it happened, she has photography and video footage and a room shot, I was like, great, awesome. And I remember maybe a week later, what's the progress on it? I remember me and Carlos, would ask him all the way up to a month later, well, where's all this footage you talked about? And it was still like in the mail, like it's in the mail, it's on its way. Never gave a direct answer after that, after telling that initial story. And you know, obviously in hindsight now, this obviously, you know, must have been BS, because I've still never seen, you know, the evidence of what he claimed in that story that he told us. But that, you know, I keep hearing this statement, moving the goalpost, that they like to use, but the irony is they're the ones that continuously move the goalpost. Me, Carlos, and now David, we've been stating the same things that we experienced for 2.5 years now. I've not changed my account or experience of it one iota. It's exactly the same as it was, because these are what the facts are. By the way, a quick interjection on the Robert Merzak 2006 MTV interview that clearly shows that King of Kong 1,047, clearly shows the transition screen of the girders. But there's also footage that was discovered a year before that, in 2005, at a game convention overseas in the UK, that Bill, Walter, and I believe Brian Koo, they were even dressed alike in the USA shirts or whatever. They attended this event. There's a man that goes by the name The Evener on the Twin Galaxies forum thread. I forgot his real name. Jason, maybe?
I don't know if his real name is public. He does fantastic work.
He does great work. And somehow he discovered this footage, and there's a section where you clearly see that same exact game, and now we're going back to 2005, being displayed at this convention, showing, you know, this same exact game that was in the 2006 MTV interview, that was in the King of Kong. And the irony of that, the fact that we're watching a film where people are watching a game with the wrong orientation. I mean, just in hindsight, it's unbelievable. I mean, the fact that it dates back to even that same exact, you know, and with the 1,047, like Carl Jopes rightly points out in a recent YouTube piece that he did, because Bill wants to rely on, oh, there's eyewitnesses. Well, there is no eyewitnesses for the King of Kong game. He has no answer for that, which is the original, obviously that became the King of Kong game. So,
Well, another thing about the moving the goalpost, Stephen mentioned the Sebring woman, and about all this footage, pictures and videos in the mail, and the minutes are being sent to Billy. Well, the story that I was told, and this could have been either at the same time or it could have been after, I can't say for sure, but I remember him saying that this woman was there, obviously the testimony, I believe it was, if you were to try to pin me on it, I'd probably say he's maybe referencing Sheila Kearney, the one that's mentioned in these affidavits and his evidence package and the court filings, where she said, she was there, she witnessed everything, there was video, there was a GameStop manager, basically hooked it up. And the story that I was told was that she has video, room shot, the board being put in. I mean, they've got video of the board being put into the machine. And the thing is, they said she actually sent all that stuff. She sent the board back to Nintendo, the one that was supposedly certified by Wayne Shure. And then she also sent all the video and all the evidence she had to Twin Galaxies, and Twin Galaxies lost it. So originally, from what Steve was saying, is that she has the video, she's sending it to Billy, but the story I got was that she sent the videos to Twin Galaxy, and Twin Galaxies lost it.
And Carlos, you were there when they told me that, I believe, correct? About story.
I was there. Like after a month, it literally became a joke where I would tell you, let me guess, they're still in the mail, right? And I remember I told you, I said, man, if it's that important, I'd drive to Sebring. It's in Florida. It's only like 3 hours. And it's shorter than going to Orlando where Disney World is. But Billy would simply just say, oh, it's in the mail. It's on its way. And it's already been a month. It's like, that's never going to arrive. It was just a shut up line. But, and to keep us going.
What David mentioned with Robert, where he's like, well, I have it in a warehouse somewhere. Well, if you actually have evidence, it'd be pretty important to actually be the first thing you do is dig that out and have it, if it really exists. So yeah, it's just,
Oh, no. Yeah, they have everything they need to save them, but just verbally. Well, remember that the King of Kong was real until it was proven not, and then it's just, oh, you believe documentaries? And then the mortgage broker swap video was real until he got busted, and then it's like, oh, it was just a promotional video, and then everything is real until it's disproven, and then it's like no, that was just for fun, and everything changes. Every story changes, and Billy manages that really well. He'll tell me and Steve, because he knows we talk, one story. He'll tell David another, and then sometimes he'll talk to the two or other people just to make sure that they're not talking to each other. He's a con man. I'm telling you, there was really no reason to ever send a Nintendo board to Nintendo. This is another, my opinion. I have to say that, my opinion, but I'm pretty sure it's accurate. That he was just like the board swap. He was creating an alibi. You know what? I can send an actual Nintendo board to Nintendo while I'm playing a MAME game, because nobody sees who's doing it. I even for one time I asked myself, is Billy not lying when he says I didn't play MAME, because was it really him playing those games? The reality is nobody's ever seen who actually played those games. It can be someone else. Or the joke, remember, the joke is that Walter Day goes to India twice a year because he's got some kid in a hut playing video games for him. It's like, give me my tapes. And then he says Billy Mitchell did him. And that was just an inside joke. But nobody really has ever seen Billy play any of those games in real life. And if you watch The King of Kong, which is now fake according to him, The King of Kong is literally a movie that made him famous. And in that whole movie, you never see Billy play. It's literally a movie about Billy never showing up to play, and it made him famous. He never shows up. The only time he showed up, he just walked by Steve, to Steve Wiebe, and that was it. Even the cover literally doesn't have Billy on it because it is just a movie about torturing Steve Wiebe and how Billy Mitchell is so good he doesn't even have to play a game. But this is just, you realize when you really say, all right, let me put the tech things to the side and let me start talking to other people that have been looking into this because this is not new. And you realize everybody has a different story, and it is just to shut that person up for the moment. But Billy told Steve Kleisath and myself about that video because he said, "Oh, I found the woman," and that he told us she actually recorded when they pulled the board out after the event. They couldn't find the guy that had locked the machine, so the day after the event, when it's all done, she went back because she was one of the managers that had set it up. They videotaped them opening that machine and pulling that board out and boxing it to go to Nintendo. And I said, great. And he was all excited. This is Billy. Billy's like, yeah, she found it and she's shipping it to us. And every couple of days, hey, did it come? Did it arrive? Did it arrive? Within, after a month of asking, we're like, let me guess, it's in the mail. And with the straightest face, Billy would say, oh, it's in the mail. It's in the mail. It's coming. And he'll walk away. I'm like, wow.
At the time, you two were excited. You're like, all right, like probably high fives. Like this is going to be
absolutely
the thing that makes a case for us.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Two things that are facts and not conjecture, Walter, are that certified Nintendo board that he mailed to Nintendo. Well, Carlos tested on that very board. He had that very board that he tested on. And when we received the digitized versions of the 1047 and the 1050, that's at the point where Carlos sat me down. Now that we have the digitized versions that Jay sent us, where it's not just once a girder finger in 2.5 hours, but you see the emulated signatures all throughout those games.
The whole game, man.
Digitized, it was clearer to realize. That's when we knew Carlos was like, well, that board that I tested, the certified Nintendo board, does not produce what's on that footage that we're looking at. It can't be. So,
Tell us a bit about how that digitized footage came about. Wasn't it I believe it was Richie Knuckles?
From what I was told, Jace was sent the digitized versions or copies of those games from Richie Knuckles. Richie had claimed that he had them for a while. He knows for a fact nobody tampered with them because they're like his private stash in essence.
There were tapes. There were tapes.
Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt, but what the story was, and I never confirmed it, but it seems to be the same story I keep hearing, was that Richie Knuckles was given a copy of when Billy played that game. And Richie Knuckles took this tape and unmodified, and he stuck it in one of his storages or one of his warehouses. And years pass, this investigation's going, and Knuckles opens one of his warehouses and he finds the tape. Of course, now they're claiming, well, it's not original. Well, Knuckles was so excited because he says, I remember when they gave me these copies and I know nobody. And what they meant was the man from Canada,
Dwayne Richard.
Dwayne Richard. Knuckles was very confident, like nobody has touched these tapes since they were given to me, when it was a copy from the master and was given to me direct, and nobody's touched it. And in his attempt to help Billy, like all of us were trying to do, he sent it to Jace or to Twin Galaxy and said, look, I can certify you that these tapes were given in my hand years ago and they've been in my storage since, and no Dwayne Richards or nobody has come and tampered with those tapes. These are clean. So of course, Jace put it in his VCR. That's a digitizer. It's like one I have. It's very expensive, and because it comes with a digital output, so it was very, very clean copy. And of course, that being digitized, because the video everybody was seeing was a camcorder aimed at a TV, and that always has timing problems. But this was a video that was copied from the master onto a VCR, so the sync signal is always there. And Jay sent me the link of those games, and boy, was it clean. And when I mean clean, it wasn't shaky. You could see the transitions in slow-mo. It didn't have the white balance off. It didn't have all these things that a camcorder to a TV would do. And when I saw that, you can see that famous girder finger everybody saw in like 1 frame in 2 hours. Well, you see that girder finger at least 15 to 20 times in that 2-hour play. The transitions were clearly not arcade. When you would look at the Fireball with Mario and the score, it was the same game. So it's like, oh, that's the same game. There's no way that with so much random stuff happening that an hour and a half in, everything looks exactly pristine. That was the exact game. And I'm like, wow. And that once again was Richie Knuckles being the same way as I was, and David and Steve Kleisath, like, oh, I found something that's going to help Billy based on the stories we've been told. Knuckles was a believer that the tapes were tampered, and he had tapes that were untampered. I believed the stories of the 2-bit converter. When I tested it, it wasn't so. Steve believed that people were trying to frame Billy. It wasn't so. David believed what he was told. He did his test, and it wasn't so. But that was what I had heard. So only reason I interjected is because it wasn't that Richie had a digital version. He had a VCR tape copy that he knows was given to him from a copy of the master, and that nobody had touched it. He had just had it in his storage with his collection of other games and arcades and memorabilia. And he believed, I have an untampered tape. And that was it. I was like, oh, you got the MTV interview that shows the girders. You have videos in the UK before the movie came out that shows the orientation problem. Even Richie's tapes, the orientation was upside down, had the girder fingers, had all the MAME signatures. It's like, too many coincidences. It's like, that's not coincidence. It's a duck. It quacks, it walks, and that's a duck, man.
Well, that was the final straw for me. That's when Carlos did take me aside. He contacted me after he was able to go frame by frame on those digitized copies and that or versions. And then he, look, man, this isn't good. It's basically, and at that point he broke it down in layman's terms because it was so clear, these versions to realize. So.
And let's bring you back in, David. Was there anything else prior to the, because I know it was basically around the time of the September 2019 evidence packet that really kind of made you go, wait, something's not right. But was there anything before that you kind of left you scratching your head? I think you listed a couple things already, but.
Well, I do remember I had started working at a new job actually in the very beginning of 2018. And I remember, and I just actually found a copy of this. I think it was probably about August. I think this is where I lost my train of thought before, where I said, all right, I was given all these stories, Rob Childs, and then what Billy was explaining based upon what I had seen in my testing. And then I kind of like had the notion in the back of my mind. I started thinking, it's like, am I being manipulated here? I said, is this what is known as gaslighting? And I remember at work actually looking up the Wikipedia entry on gaslighting. And I did print out, and then I noticed, I said, this seems like exactly what Billy and Rob and some others were doing. And yet I'd still continue to give them the benefit of the doubt because, you know what, I don't want to, just come out and accuse somebody, and say, just say, yeah, you know what, they claim they have all this evidence besides the technical, which had to do with the video, had to do with the pictures, had to do with all the eyewitnesses who said they they saw the boards being put in and all this other kind of stuff. And I'm thinking like, oh, we don't have it. It was sent to Twin Galaxies. It seems like anytime you asked a question, there was always an answer that put the evidence farther out of reach, where nobody could ever have access to it. And I'm thinking, I printed this out August, highlighted some stuff, gaslighting. I said this, and then of course later in 2019, after the evidence package, and seeing how, let's say, Billy or his son was repurposing everything to say that, oh, Rob Childs never really said this, or he didn't have all the information. He knew little to nothing about the process. I said, really? It seems like that was in response to my initial assessment, because when I talked to Billy about that, the last conversation I had with him, Rob Childs apparently was upset that I was calling him out, or maybe alluding to him as a liar or lying. And it's like, I said, no, I'm not. This isn't something that I can go back. He was saying, well, we can fix this. We can try to make it so where you are comfortable with it. And maybe he's not getting it. I'm thinking what Rob Child said was false. He had never claimed this. He was very certain about what he claimed. And all this time, I let everything go and say, all right, benefit of the doubt, we'll finally see the evidence. And it wasn't happening. And no matter, and I wasn't going to say, all right, I think this was maybe, what was it? September, I think 17th is when the last time I talked to Billy Mitchell. And he was trying to say, well, we can make something where you're comfortable. And basically he said, we can just change the statements to make it, where you're comfortable with it. And it's like, no, I mean, you've already put out statements that are not true with Rob Childs and stuff like that. And how in the world am I and it was kind of like saying, well, maybe you don't understand, maybe you misread something. And it's like, no, I know exactly what I read. And everybody else who saw it publicly knew what it was read. And then basically I haven't talked to him since then. And then things that keep coming to light, my assessment, my further understanding of what a microcontroller is, for instance. So that's like a mini computer as opposed to like a microprocessor. Like these early arcade shop boards, that can produce, quote, MAME-like signatures. It's like their own computer. A microprocessor, a CPU that was used like on a Donkey Kong, it's not the same thing. A Z80 is not the same thing as like a modern microcontroller from, let's say, the 2000 era. Arcade shop PCB or arcade SD, which is a more modern thing, probably came out in 2010. And all these things, it's like, well, the reason why you could see some of these modern signatures that I thought, if it's possible on a modern computer, then maybe it's possible because it is a hardware. It is a PCB. Maybe it could have been done in some fashion or some configuration with external hardware or something else that was used in conjunction with the original Donkey Kong board. Maybe you could produce it. But when I found out that these early boards were actually using, their core emulation was using an earlier version of MAME, that didn't help the matter either. So what do you do? That's like, so I would definitely say that what is seen on those tapes is not from arcade. And then regardless of how they try to point back to me and say my initial assessment was inconclusive, I said, well, you know what? When things come to light that call into question your initial assessment, then what do? Just stick with it doggedly, or do you adjust it based upon the evidence? I think, someone who's open and honest is going to do that, as opposed to like shouting, as I put in my declaration, inconclusive. I said, well, you can always hope and pray that nobody will really look into it and they're just going to believe your word, but evidence speaks for itself. What do you do? So.
You also have a history with Pac-Man, and I believe, if I remember correctly, when you first started saying, hey, something's not right here, you were also citing claims relating to Pac-Man.
Hello? What's that now?
You have a history with Pac-Man, of course, fastest perfect Pac-Man. And if I remember correctly, there were claims in the evidence packet regarding Pac-Man and Billy's Pac-Man score that you were like, wait a second. Am I remember correctly, that was kind of part of your turnaround?
Like I said, I was given the benefit of the doubt. I didn't want to say, all right, am I being gaslit and manipulated? Okay, there's evidence, there's witnesses. And then when you find out that in the evidence package, which Billy Mitchell told me was never meant to be made public, that is, I do have that documented. And it's like when he's saying that he made a public announcement to achieve the first perfect Pac-Man on the 4th of July weekend, I said, that's false. I knew it's false. I mean, because I know the guy that was his main competitor, Rick Fothergill. Rick Fothergill was never notified about this. All the evidence that I've seen with Billy Mitchell claiming that Walter Day didn't know that he was even there to do this thing in 2016 and some other YouTube videos. And then he's saying a public announcement was made, and he'll say stuff like press releases were put out. There was media there. And I was like, no, none of that is true. And it's like, no matter how you try to spin it, it's never going to be true. And I asked Billy, I sent him text messages. I said, here's this thing from the evidence package, which says that you achieved your perfect Pac-Man. And then you said a public announcement was made that you were going to be there and you promised a perfect score. I said, could you show me anything, any evidence whatsoever that you actually sent out a public announcement or anything like that was made prior to you arriving there on July 1st? And he wanted to talk. And I said, well, I don't need to talk for an hour. I sent him back a text message. I don't need to talk for an hour for you to send me a thing. He says, well, I'm not comfortable with texting and stuff like that. I said, well, you know what? The time that it would take for you to just send me a link would be far less than the time it would take for me to talk with you and all this kind of stuff. I never got an answer. I've talked to Chris Ira about this. And it seems that anybody who's been dragged into this thing, they're going to, at least if they're on Billy's side, they're going to change their story to fit with his. And he claimed in that evidence package that he went to Japan, which he did go to Japan. I mean, there's no doubt that. But there's a lot of things that are in question there, too, where he said that he actually did do another perfect game in front of a Japanese crowd. I said, there's no evidence for that either. Basically, it's another lie. And you will notice that none of that so-called claims in the evidence package in 2019 were included in the 2020 court filings. Those things are missing. But the thing is, he's made recent statements of the same. You know, I mean, you'll look in some of these old newspaper clippings where he said that he was brought on stage with Nakamura, and then basically he repeated their performance. So this was, I mean, you can find clippings back there. He can deny it now all he wants, or he can claim that he did, and then say, oh, we got to cover it up because I've been called on it. Dave Race called my bluff, so I'm going to basically just maybe let that die out. But you still got the newspaper clippings from years ago, which claimed that he did it. Rick Fothergill told me, and whether or not this should be included or not, because Rick doesn't want to have anything to do with this drama, and I don't blame him, quite frankly. Right. He said, Rick Fothergill told Billy Mitchell told Rick, at least of what Rick told me, was that he said he went there with an arcade original Pac-Man machine, but they didn't have a way of actually hooking up to their machine. And he said the machine that they had didn't even have a split screen. So there's no way that he would have, quote, performed, according to what Billy told Rick, a perfect Pac-Man game in Japan. So what he is saying is historical revisionism. It's an anachronism. You try to change things to make it fit with your narrative that you're trying to portray to the public now. And I think Billy thinks that if he says it long enough and with all the passion and with all the people that really don't know the details, that, you know what, people will accept it. And I think that he thinks that a jury will accept it as well, which, you know what, like Carlos said, he's a con man. What can you do?
Wasn't there a comment Billy Mitchell Jr. posted about that? How it doesn't matter about the footage, it matters what a jury thinks of the eyewitnesses or something like that?
Oh yeah, that was a message that he sent to me and says like,
Yes.
it's not going to matter. It's going to matter what, you know, what 30 plus witnesses have to say. And I was like, really? Okay.
Yeah.
So this is an interesting subject, and I suppose we could start with you, Steve, because you were kind of the first to receive Billy's wrath, for a lack of a better word. Who would like to? Would any of you like to talk about how you've been treated since you kind of basically came out and said, "Yeah, these were not arcade rendered"?
I wouldn't call it wrath. It's more just a disappearance. They just, you know, erased me from existence from their, from their, I don't know, click or whatever. I mean, shortly after that verdict came out, that was pretty much it. I never heard from any of them ever again. I made an attempt a few times to go to arcade game sales, talk with Robert. You know, I'd spoken with Bill once. I think it was actually on July 4th, maybe, of that year. Well, I know I definitely talked with them briefly. And, you know, the one time I talked to Bill after the verdict, where I actually got a hold of him, he basically said, "I have no harsh words for you, sir," and that was about it. He didn't really have much to say, and that's pretty much the last I ever heard from him. I'd say the only wrath, if you will, was from the son, from Junior, when they started to do retro arcade night, obviously without me. And you know, I'd seen that the event, they were still going to try to do it periodically. And there was one that was coming up, I believe it was around September or October of I guess 2019. Yeah. Or either 2018 or 2019. But I basically called Robert and was like, "Hey, you know, I'd still like to come to the event, pay the money, even though it was my own event that I started with Robert and I wasn't a part of it anymore." I basically was like, I'm more than happy to come and pay the admission, especially if it's going for, you know, a charity or something community based. And, you know, because there's a lot of people who would show up to this that know me as the host of the event for 8 years. And, you know, it could still be a fun event regardless of what took place, you know, agree to disagree, move on, be civil, still have this event for the community or what have you. And at that point, Robert was like, "I don't have a problem with you coming, but you know, you're going to need to talk to Bill." And, you know, I tried to get a hold of Senior and I couldn't get a hold of him. And then Robert was like, "Well, you know, contact Junior then." So I sent a Facebook message to Billy Mitchell Jr., basically saying that, you know, hey, the event's coming up. You know, Robert doesn't have a problem with me coming, but Robert did tell me that if I showed up, Bill would walk out of his own event, is what Robert told me. So, but he also told me, you know, if you can't get a hold of Senior, then message Junior. So I messaged Junior and I was like, "This is what I was told." And I was like, "But I'd rather talk to the source to see if this is the case or if that was not the case." And it was a very civil, objective message I sent to Billy Mitchell Jr. And his response was basically a very, you know, vitriol, you know, calling me a cancer that needs to be suppressed. You know,
I remember that.
saying, threatening police activity. If I showed up to the event, I'd be escorted out by police officers. And then he also said, but what's funny is he actually acknowledges that we were friends, me, Robert, and Bill, for 8 years. What's funny is in Bill's one of his recent evidence replies to Twin Galaxies, he actually claims that we were not friends. Bill actually says that in one of his most recent filings. So like he painted Carlos as some guy, random guy that came off the street. He claims that we were never friends. And he basically says that what me and Carlos did never represented him, was never on behalf of him. It was self-determined, just an independent testing of our own accord. That's what is said in his recent filings to reply to Twin Galaxies evidence.
Oh, to the courts, yeah.
Yeah, to the courts, which is a
Yeah.
flat out lie.
We're just fanboys, and they forget that they paid to fly me to Bannon, California to do a speech on their behalf.
I remember, because they wanted me to go out too, to Banning on that trip, but I couldn't get out of work to do it. But they definitely paid for Carlos's flight. Carlos definitely shared a hotel room with Bill in Banning, California. So
Yeah.
it's just ludicrous. It's absolutely like it's laughable that they would try to paint a picture that we're just some random people that they barely knew, and you know, like in my case, we weren't friends. And he clearly says we weren't friends. Well, what's funny is I have text messages from Bill that I still have to this day where he's actually thanking me for my friendship. I mean, you can go anywhere. You can go all over YouTube. There's tons of videos of Retro Arcade Night where it's me, Bill, and Robert hanging out, taking questions to interviews from local magazines. There's actually some more recent footage from 2012 when me, Bill, and Robert are in his office from the old location of Arcade Game Sales, and you know, just kind of shooting the shit. It's about probably 15, 20 minutes worth of footage. So you can, and we have a trading card. I mean, there's a trading card of me, Bill, and Robert, which celebrates the event Retro Arcade Night that I hosted, Robert facilitated, and Billy regularly attended. So I mean, it's just ridiculous. But as far as the vitriol, it was more or less just they cut the cord with me. There's no more use I have for them, so erase me from existence, except for that exchange with Billy Mitchell Jr. Later on in the year regarding the Retro Arcade Night that they were trying to resurrect on their own without me, of course. So
Mm-hmm. And Carlos, now I think I just got a message across the thing saying that you've got to leave soon, or
Yes, I gotta go actually.
yeah.
So,
Did you have anything you wanted to say before you took off?
no, I just hope the truth comes out. Um, Billy Mitchell's a slippery one. He does not care about the truth as long as it puts him in a positive light. And I'll say it again, like I said to him once, well, I wrote to him and I said in a video, I'm like, if you want to lie to be famous, you know what? That's your prerogative. Do it. But when you're suing people based on the lie, when you're stealing people's scores and throwing them under the bus when they confront you, that's crossing a line. That's nasty. I mean, people lie all the time to look grander, but you're literally suing people to shut them up from saying the truth.
Yeah.
And that's just despicable. This is terrible. We're not talking 10,000. We're talking $1 million because it gets press. It's always for press, and it's just terrible. He's already famous. Yeah, I told him, you're already famous. You're already famous. You will always be the most known classic arcade gamer. Just fess up. People will forgive you in a year or two because that's how people are, and that's it. But that's my stance. But I thank you for the time and stuff.
Yeah,
But
thank you, sir.
Thank you. Yeah, thanks, Carlos.
all right,
Have a nice day,
David.
Carlos.
We'll see you, Steve. We'll
Yep,
talk
have a good
soon.
one. We'll talk soon.
All right, take care, man.
All right.
Cool,
And then
now it is,
Walter, I only have about probably 10 more minutes. So
all right, yeah, it's probably a good time to start wrapping up and stuff. David, did you want to talk about how you've been treated since you started being more critical of Billy's position?
Well, a lot of it has to do with not really that much critical. I mean, I've seen some things recently, where I let's say, for instance, I posted something on Facebook which says, where I made the claim that there is evidence. Billy Mitchell basically told me that if Carlos, for instance, didn't really get on board or sign with it, basically, then that he would be part of like legal action, and I said, I have evidence to prove that, or documentation to prove that. And someone called into question and said, well, what is that evidence? And basically someone just calling me out as a liar. And then it ended up being that I blocked this person, or or eventually they were unfriended or whatever. And then I remember getting something in the mail shortly thereafter from a company called DBM, which I looked up, and it was Dick's by Mail. Someone was sending me something from a company, Dick's by Mail, and you know what? And I guess if someone has an account with that kind of stuff, I mean, it doesn't talk about my character; it talks about theirs. So, I mean, I've seen screenshots where people are calling me derogatory names, like calling me a cunt and all this other kind of crap, and they're blasting me. You know what? It's laughable. I mean, it's child's play, man. I mean, if you want to act like a child, go for it. I mean, I could have responded in kind and posted a bunch of nonsense, or like send mail or send some crap to them. But what am I going to be, just like them? It's so stupid. It's funny. And then I'll get stuff like Billy Mitchell will use code words on his Twitch stream. And you know what? People say, oh yeah, you spend too much time looking at Billy Mitchell. I said, no, the ones that are wasting their time with Billy Mitchell are the ones that spend all hours of the night watching his Twitch streams. Yeah, I mean, I'll admit, I'll look at some of his Twitch streams, let's say, for instance, either in the beginning or at the end of it, because that's where he usually starts talking. He never stops talking about stuff. He'll make false claims to all the people who will just eat all his words up. Not a shred of evidence, by the way. And then he'll start talking bad, or he'll play like things like use code words. Like recently, he used a code word about, I believe he was referring to me. Let's put it that way. And he'll start bad mouthing me or something like that, using a code word because he's a coward. Did you hear that, Billy? You're a coward. You want to talk to my face? Come talk to my face. All right, you're the one that says nobody will ever come to you and they always talk behind their keyboard. Well, guess who's talking behind their keyboard, Billy? You want? I mean, you can put this out there. You know what? He claims to be the best at whatever he does. He is a subpar Pac-Man player. And on this recent ant string challenge, he came in 5th. Okay. I was having problems with the ant string, for instance, let's say, because I believe that there's a significant lag. There's input responsiveness, which is an issue. And then people are trying to claim Billy and whoever was with him during one of his streams were like dogging me using a false name about me complaining and whining and stuff, belly aching about, not being able to play or something like that. Well, you know what? I'm getting this off my chest now. Let's put it that way. Whether this should be edited or not is another issue. But it ends up where he placed 5th in that Antstream tournament, and I placed 3rd. So when it comes to that, I didn't post, what my screen name was. My screen name was Courseplay, for instance. I used a Bluetooth keyboard connected to my cell phone. So yeah, I had trouble with the internet. I don't have the greatest internet in the world, but I still came in 3rd place, and I still kicked Billy Mitchell's ass. So there you go. I mean, if he's going to talk, then let him. If he's going to talk to my face. Don't talk, on your little Twitch stream, Billy.
Using code names and stuff, yeah.
Yeah. He's a coward, and his son's a coward too. Okay,
yeah,
there
is one other point of contention actually. Now, when you were asking the timeline after the verdict, and that was an article by Josh Harmon from EGM, where he contacted me proactively to interview me about my account of the whole situation. And shortly after, I had back and forth with Josh Harmon, giving my account of everything. All of a sudden, Neil Hernandez, speaking of this guy that's a recent, over the last year and a half, ally of Bill, speaking of the Twitch streams, you'll hear Bill talking to him a lot on his streams or what have you. This guy used to be a good friend of mine. He worked with me for my car service. We talked every day. We were very good friends at one point, me and Neil Hernandez. And, he started getting closer to Bill, and he started getting further away from me as a result of that, without really going into so many details. But he proactively contacted Josh Harmon, the editor of EGM, and made all these false claims and flat out lies about me in some crazy attempt to think that Josh Harmon would discredit or remove my account because they were trying to paint me as some unstable person. So I can't help to think that Bill put Neil up to this, because Neil had a voicemail of me calling Bill. So how could Neil have that? And then Neil also he illegally recorded me. In the state of Florida, you cannot record somebody without their knowledge and permission, and then keep it for a period of time and then send it to somebody else unbeknownst to me, basically trying to, in this case, paint me as like, because I was raising my voice and I was kind of angry apparently in this recording. But what's funny is, typically, I guess historically, maybe people want to record other people without them knowing it to catch them in a lie. But in this case, I'm not lying about anything. He's just recording me and then trying to manipulate it later on to be like, you see, this guy's, his voice, he's raising his voice, he's crazy. Clearly, he's an unstable person. It was more in that manner than actually trying to catch somebody in a lie per se. But in any case, I didn't even know anything about this until Josh Harmon contacted me, and he was like, this guy named Neil Hernandez contacts me out of the blue. I didn't ask for this guy or to talk to him, saying that he has all this information about you and how, and then he just went into all these flat out lies. One was that I was a spy for Jace Hall during the whole dispute process, which was just hilarious. Like, I would talk to Jace Hall every day and report to him like what was going on.
According to Neil.
According to Neil, yeah, that's what he told Josh Harmon. And I told Josh Harmon, you know what? I will give you my phone records during that period of time, and I will show you the amount of times I actually talked to Jace, which was like 3 or 4 tops in the whole 6 weeks. And one of the times I talked with him, ironically, Bill was standing right there I had Jace Hall on a speakerphone, and I was still defending Bill at that point, trying to buy him and Carlos more time to conduct more tests on behalf of Bill, with Jace Hall on a speakerphone, with Bill standing right in front of me at Arcade Game Sales while I'm talking to Jace on the speakerphone. That was one of the exchanges I had with Jace. Still completely at that point in defense of Bill on as far as I went. So the fact that Neil would go to Josh Harmon unsolicited and start just, he said stuff that was so like off the, like, I had a stroke when I was a kid and I paid him unfairly when he worked with me, which was absolutely just laughable. And just stuff that had nothing, long story short, nothing to pertain to the situation. It's just personal attacks. And when I found out that he had a recording of a phone conversation between me and him without my knowledge or permission, that is against the law in the state of Florida. So if I wanted to, I could have went the extra step and really tried to make it interesting by reporting this or filing a report on this. But then, you know, I was thinking, is it really worth it? People are going to think I'm probably shallow for doing such a thing. You know, it's whatever. Obviously, it didn't have its intended effect because Josh Harmon also posted about this in that EGM article. You can go back and read it right now. It's archived, egmnow.com. I think it's called Split Screen Man is the name of the article. And amazingly, I almost forgot that Josh Harmon actually points all this out. You, for anybody that, you know, doesn't want to take my word for it, go ahead and read the article. You can look it up. And Josh Harmon is the one that revealed all this to me. And when I heard this from Josh, I was like, this is incredible. This guy was my friend. He completely lied about me. And I didn't even know he was doing this. And the only reason I knew is because Josh Harmon told me he was trying to do this. And Josh Harmon was like, well, I would never be able to use these recordings anyway, because it's illegal in the state of Florida. So why would I try to use them? And he was like, and he listened to him and he actually said, I mean, everything you're saying matches up with everything you're telling me. It's just, he's kind of pushing buttons and you're getting angry on the recording. And this was after, you know, this was post verdict. So anyway, now that I think about it, that was the other situation where, you know, it's another one of those, not Bill directly, but somebody kind of on behalf of Bill that's kind of going to task for him.
Because he also didn't have Josh Harmon's contact info, I don't believe.
Yeah, Josh Harmon told me he met him briefly once when Neil was with Bill in Banning, California. There was not Arcade Expo, but there was another event that Josh Harmon showed up to because he was going to interview Bill. Remember, he interviewed Bill a lot for this article.
Yeah.
And I think he said in passing, Neil was with Bill at that event and he met him once briefly, but didn't know who he was, you know, in essence, from a hole in the ground. And then when Neil proactively contacted him, yeah, he told me, I don't know why this guy's contacting me. I didn't ask to speak with him. You know, he's just obviously, clearly he's doing this on behalf of Bill to trying to discredit you and paint a picture like you're some unstable person and I should strike your account from the story based on all the things that he said about me that were flat out lies. So, you know, so that kind of lost me for good with Neil Hernandez as far as I went, because I'm like, well, if he's capable of doing that, you know, get out of here. You know, that's like beyond reproach. That's like despicable to me. So
I would point out that, I mean, just to be clear, is that the reason why the recordings were illegal is because both of you are in the state of Florida.
Yeah.
And the state of Florida, their recording laws have to do with both, or all parties have to give consent to a recording. Federal law requires a one-party consent, and most other states is a one-party consent as well. So just to clear that up.
Florida is a rare state. I think California is another one where it has to be two-party consent.
Yeah, Washington's
Other
the same
states
way.
where, like
here.
David said, what's that?
Washington's the same way. It has to be two parties here.
Okay, yeah.
Well, the one thing I did find out with Washington was that Washington is an all-party, but if you tell somebody that you're recording, whether they consent or not, that will serve as, you know, proof. If you tell someone you're recording the conversation, whether they agree with it or not, you're still allowed to record it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah. I mean, if they don't want to be recorded, they can always just hang up.
Hang up. Yeah.
But once you notify them, that serves as consent.
In this
At least for the
situation,
state of Washington.
Neil had recorded this and he had it for like 10 months before he decided to send it to the editor of this article just out of the blue. So it was very, very shady, to say the least, to do something like that to someone where I never did anything to that guy except be a friend and try to help him with work. And it's just unbelievable. I don't get it, how there's certain people, even now, a few people that are so loyal to Bill. And it's like, I know they're smart enough to understand what the facts and the truth is of the situation. I don't get it. Is it like, they must think they're getting something out of it? I mean, I don't know. I don't get it. It's a disconnect for me.
They're going to be, they think they're going to be in the next movie, maybe?
Maybe it's something like that. I don't know. I have no idea. It's baffling to me how, there's a few people that are still kind of, I don't know if it's the fanboy, fangirl type thing, or if it's they were promised something, or they're going to be a part of something, or they're going to make their own reputation as a result of it. I have no idea. Mind-boggling to me at this point.
Yeah.
But what Carlos said earlier, like, I don't, I guess I've never actually met a true con artist, in essence. And now I'm realizing and experiencing over these past couple of years, like, oh, this is the essence of what that term is.
Yeah. Because I went in, I mean, I came at this as kind of a rando from the internet, just kind of researching out of curiosity. And at first I thought, he's a legit player, but probably succumbed to the temptation. That's something that happens with cheaters sometimes. They come up against the wall and they succumb to the temptation. And it was only after really researching, really digging behind the scenes, I was just like, oh, wow, this guy's a complete asshole.
Well, you have a situation like with the Lance Armstrong, but in his case, he actually was a great athlete and a great cyclist. Probably didn't need to do what he did to get an edge, or so to speak. But to David's point, that's even different from Bill, because Bill is a good gamer, but not. To David's point, definitely not the best or great, and he's using this, these smoke and mirrors, and this kind of a history, if you will, to vault him to a status that he's really not.
Mm-hmm. So it's probably time to start wrapping this up. Did either of you have any kind of final thoughts you wanted to put on the record for this? Start with
I'll
you,
just
David?
say, we're going to see what happens with everything. There's back and forth as far as anti-slap and undertaking motions, and I know myself, and I'm sure, and David as well, we signed declarations. So if it ever does get to a situation where it goes to court, yes, we will be able to testify, and we'll be able to once again share what I've been saying when asked, or when sharing for the last 2.5 years of the account of this whole situation. And hopefully justice will be served eventually. It's a process, it takes time, and but hopefully the truth will shine through, and everybody will be able to move on from this, and continue to restore this community, hopefully.
Absolutely. And you, David?
Well, I guess I would just say that in wrapping this up, obviously there's been the court case and the anti-slap and motion for undertaking. And as Steve said, we both have made declarations. Billy Mitchell and his son took a particular, I think, swipe at me, but he's also done it with Steven and Carlos, and basically trying to deny there was any interaction, that we really had anything to do on his behalf, even though there is, in the public record now, a voicemail where he said he appreciates everything I've done on his behalf. So, I mean, he contradicts himself out of the gate. Yes, we weren't just doing this out of the blue, just for our own good, good time. This was done definitely to defend Billy, which we all at the time believed that he was innocent, and we were trying to show that he was innocent. Views changed. They took a swipe at me in some of the recent declarations, calling me a liar and things like that. Well, the evidence points quite clearly to the very opposite. Billy Mitchell is a liar. I believe he's a compulsive liar. And his son, in his declaration, trying to lie about me, about a phone conversation we had, and other things like that, as Carlos would say, is despicable. They're both liars and they're both cowards. And when it comes to Billy Mitchell, I initially believed that he didn't cheat, but I believe the evidence is undeniable. He cheated, which means that he's a liar and a cheater. I guess that's all I have to say.
Yeah. Sounds good, folks.
All right, man. I appreciate it.
Well, thanks for having us, Walter, and obviously keep us in the loop on the, the presentation, or, where we go from here on this segment. So,
All right.
Yeah, thank you both for coming on. Hopefully to vet all this and get this on YouTube pretty soon.
All right. I appreciate it. Hey,
all right,
thanks a
good
lot,
to see you,
man.
David.
Hey, thanks.
Yeah.